Let's take a look at our XML Reader application. We're going to be working in PrimalScript, as I've demonstrated before. It's just easier to work with this when we are going to be dealing with output and our XML file that we've already taken a look at. You can find this in the Reading and Writing XML folder, and then further subfolder XML Reader. We're just looking in the debug folder, and then we have our file that we have here. The example.xml file is going to live there. This is where the XML needs to be. And then we just have an output file as well as the application itself when we compile it. So further up, we're just going to see a .pws, which is our PrimalScript workspace, XML Reader, and then we have our XML reading.cs file. This is just the class that we're going to be running. Now, you could just open that up in PrimalScript, or you can just compile the XML reading.cs file from the command line compiler, as we've been doing throughout the training. Really easy to do that. Again, this is just really to get a nice view of how things work. The command line compiler definitely can be your friend with some very simple examples. This is a simple example for the most part, as you're going to see. Now, we just look here, we have our information here that we can look at. The XML reading.cs file is what we're looking at. Very simple to get started, like I said, using system.xml. Make sure you watch that case sensitivity, lowercase m, lowercase l. We're just creating a simple namespace and a simple class, XML reading. Within our main function here, all we do is establish a variable text reader from an XML text reader, just a variable, and then we're going to use the equal new command to go after that XML text reader method there with our file name in quotes. So that's all you have to do to pass that through. Additionally, if you wanted to actually use XML in a variable name, for example, or just a string, you could pass the string here instead of using this new string reader. As we've seen in the string section, you could just put your XML right within the quotes here or use a variable here. Really easy to do that, but we're not going to do that. We're going to run it from a file. Because you can use XML in your applications, you don't have to always go from a file. It's safer to have your XML constructed within the application, or maybe you have it encrypted or something like that within your application, because then you don't have to load it from an XML file. But many different ways to use XML. So the first thing we do is we just do a read. You don't have to do this particular one because we have the move to element command, which is going to allow us to move to that next element. We just do a read in the beginning. That's the first thing I usually do, but you'll see that we just look at our XML. We have a main node here, and then we have an order node, and then we have item nodes, and these can have tabs there. Note that the white space, you saw I put tabs here, the white space is very important. You have to check for it within your reading and writing of your XML. You have to work with it to put it in there when you need it, write it, or read it, and account for it when you're reading it. Now, the white space is really there for you. So if you want to make this really computer friendly, you won't have any white space in your XML, and you'll strip it out before you actually use that file to work within an application. Or you just won't work with it with white space. It would be smart to even have a function or a method or a class library that actually puts white space in when you need to debug and takes white space out when you don't need to debug and you want to just write that file. Because that way the white space won't need to be accounted for and you don't have to worry about it in your application. You'll see if we look at our output file over here, you'll see that we have a node type called whitespace, also a node type called element. So when we deal with our elements, we have to account for this and do an if condition or some sort of check for whether or not we're looking at the element node type. Here, this node type is whitespace, and I'll show you how that looks. If we just come back up, so after we do our first read, you see that I have a move to element. Doesn't matter, you could do either or. You could just read through the file, or you can do a move to element as well and check to make sure that the file itself isn't reaching the end. We'll see that in a little bit in a while loop. So you can see further down we just do some console.write lines, and then you can see that when we have a particular element, we can actually get the name of that element at whatever point we are, the base URI, which I'll explain what that is, and then even the line number. What line number are we in within this file? And then you see we have our node type, textreader.nodeType. We convert it to a string. And you can see you don't always have to do the conversion to string if you don't want to. It's up to you, and it depends on the types that you're converting from and to. And then we do an additional read. And now we're doing another node type check. This is actually the white space node type. So that second node type that I showed you there, that's the white space. So after the next read, you're always going to get white space, so you do have to account for it. And how do we do that? Well, when we do our loop, our main loop, like I said, reading, just a very simple loop with an if condition. When we do that read, this is going to read until the file is completely read. We're going to look for the items. So how do we do that? We're going to look for a node type that is .element. This is how you would check to make sure that you have the proper node type, XML node type .element. And the if condition would be check our node type, TextReader.nodeType. And then we want to look to make sure that our TextReader.name value, our property, is equal to item. If it is, that's when we do this bit of processing here. So that if statement is going to narrow things down. So it makes it very easy to work with your XML. You could just come through and look for all the items in a cart order, because you know if you're sending a cart from your client side to your server side on the internet, for example, you know that you can just send this XML and you just want to process the items in between. If you know that your XML is going to be formatted correctly and you're confident that the XML is going to be presented correctly or created correctly from the beginning, it's not hand-coded but computer processed, then you know that you can just grab the items for an order and you're pretty safe there. You could even just grab the order first, get the ID, and then process each of the items.